I've broken some rules to make this.
From an onlooker's perspective, the OceanGate Titan subwreck seemed like an avoidable tragedy. The irony of them attempting to visit the Titanic, one of history's greatest examples of human hubris, where more than 1,500 people died on the ship said to be unsinkable.
So this is the ship they say is unsinkable.
It is unsinkable. God himself could not sink this ship.
However, there's more to this Titanic-like disaster than meets the eye. The expedition to the Titanic wreckage cost $250,000 per person and was open to passengers aged 17 and above, according to the information from OceanGate. Whether it was the countdown on the oxygen that they had remaining, the mention of the famously known Titanic, or the headlines, "Billionaire Lost at Sea," the story garnered a lot of attention, and not necessarily in a positive way. There was a somewhat dry, sardonic humour across all social media platforms. Even a Subway branch was criticised for their flippant marketing tactic. Potentially, with everything going on in the world, crisis after crisis, people have become desensitised without intending to be malicious. Social media seems to be the place to make a joke out of the most serious topics. The key factor that seemed to make people believe they had license to have such strong thoughts and opinions was the fact that these passengers were wealthy billionaires, and it seemed stupid is the only fitting word, that they would embark on this deadly adventure.
This phenomenon, I don't know if we'd ever heard of it, I don't know if you were aware of it before, called the Explorers Club.
However, let's explore that deeper as we discuss the passengers who embarked on this Titan journey. British billionaire Hamish Harding, 58 years old. Majority of the focus has been on Hamish Harding, who was the first person named when the sub was reported missing. Shahzada Dawood, 60 years old. The Dawood family is said to be one of the richest families in Pakistan, owning an industrial empire. He loved exploring natural habitats, as per a statement from the Dawood Group. Suleiman Dawood, 19 years old. Son of Shahzada Dawood. Not much is known about the young teenager, but his aunt, Shahzada's older sister, said her nephew went on the expedition to please his father, as a gesture for Father's Day, but he wasn't very for it, and was in fact terrified to go. Stockton Rush, the CEO and founder of OceanGate, the key central figure in this disaster, who has faced much criticism. Finally, Paul Henry Nargelate, age 73. Paul Henry had more than 2 decades in the French Navy, was a renowned oceanographer, and had 37 dives to the Titanic shipwreck under his belt. It was his knowledge of the Titanic and the pictures he took during his dives that helped inspire his friend, James Cameron, to make the 1997 blockbuster, Titanic. In OceanGate's Titan commercial to attract fish for these billionaires, there was the promise of adventure.
Heading to target, 12 degrees.
An epic voyage to the world's most famous shipwreck. This is a rare opportunity for you to explore Titanic.
Once the submersible is launched, you will begin to see alien-like forms whiz by the viewpoint as you sink deeper and deeper into the ocean. The descent takes approximately 2 hours, but it feels like the blink of an eye. For the crew to get to the Titanic wreckage, it would take 2.5 hours for Titan to drop 13,000 feet to the bottom of the ocean. One of the tallest buildings in the world stands in Dubai at 2,722 feet. That's 4 of those tall buildings. According to the company's itinerary, groups could spend hours exploring the wreckage and surrounding debris before beginning the round trip back to the surface. On Saturday, June 18th, 2023, over 300 miles away from the Canadian port St. John's, Newfoundland, is where their dive would begin. This is the last picture taken of the Titan on the floating platform before it began its journey. When some people think of a sub, they instantly think of a submarine versus a submersible. They imagine a giant vessel. However, the Titan submersible was 22 feet long. Half of a semi-trailer is 22 feet long. Strangely enough, our small intestine is 22 feet long. What would possess any sane person to think that this was a good idea? In a text exchange released by Vegas investor Jay Bloom, it shows a message correspondence as Stockton Rush attempted to sell the tickets to him for a discounted price of $150,000. Stockton said the Titan was way safer than flying in a helicopter or even scuba diving. None of these passengers went on the Titan thinking that this was a kamikaze mission. They had been led to believe that it would be safe. Bloom also commented that Stockton had a huge amount of confidence which was unshakable. It was his dream, Bloom said. He's a good guy. I really liked him and I think he had good intentions, but he drank his own Kool-Aid.
Jay Bloom was approached by the OceanGate CEO Stockton Rush multiple times over the span of several months.
There are experiences and adventures that financial limitations stop majority of people considering, let alone imagining. However, with wealth at your fingertips, some of these people clearly and understandably feel like the sky is the limit. When news first broke, the person first mentioned was Harding, British billionaire. So let's discuss him and his life to try to understand why he went on this expedition before moving on to the CEO himself, Stockton Rush. Harding was an explorer who obtained 3 Guinness World Records relating to his work as an adventurer. In 2019, he was commended for the fastest circumnavigation of the Earth via North and South Poles. In 2021, he achieved the greatest distance covered at full ocean depth and the greatest duration spent at full ocean depth. He also went into space in 2022 with Jeff Bezos' Blue Origin company. This man was an explorer through and through, to the depths of the ocean, to the highest point in the sky. He loved exploring. In his last Facebook post on June 19th, Harding wrote, "I am proud to finally announce that I joined OceanGate Expeditions for their RMS Titanic mission as a mission specialist on the sub going down to the Titanic. Due to the worst weather in Newfoundland in 40 years, this mission is likely to be the first and only manned mission to the Titanic in 2023. A weather window has just opened up, and we are going to attempt a dive tomorrow. We started steaming from St. John's, Newfoundland, Canada yesterday, and are planning to start dive operations around 4 a.m. tomorrow morning. Until then, we have a lot of preparations and briefings to do. The team on the sub has a couple of legendary explorers, some of which have done over 30 dives to the RMS Titanic since the 1980s, including P.H. Nargelet. More expedition updates to follow, if the weather holds." 8 a.m., the time the submersible originally planned to start its descent. However, its descent would start 4 hours later. 12 noon. Titan submersible starts what should be a 2-hour descent to the Titan wreckage. 1:45 p.m. Communication with Titan is lost. Sadly, Harding would never make another update. Could Harding have seen this coming? Mark Hannaford, co-founder of Across the Divide, explorer himself and friend of Harding, said, "Given the 7 descents prior, the risk was mitigated on the fact that it had been proved by the 7 descents. At this time, we know there had only been 5 descents, but what he was trying to say was given that it had dived successfully 5, or in their minds 7 times, Harding had reason to believe that this would be a safe journey. And he also commented that his friend was a man of the mindset, big risk, big reward, as we can see from all the prior adventures that he had had.
So everybody has different passions, of course. And I think for Hamish, he was an aviator. So he was very passionate about machines, man-made machines. And I think for him, that was probably a big part of the allure.
So Harding, much like the other passengers, went on the knowledge that they had, the knowledge that they were made to believe was true. And who made them think this was true? Stockton Rush.
Back in 2019, Carl was one of the first to set foot inside the doomed Titan.
Carl Stanley said that he had warned Stockton about the submersible. Stanley claims that Stockton definitely knew the mission would end this way. He went to the extent of accusing him of murdering all the passengers on the submersible and making them pay for it in his 60 Minutes Australia interview. Carl Stanley described his experience of going test diving in the Bahamas in 2019 on the Titan. He said that he heard gunshot-like sounds every 3 to 4 minutes. He also said that he had raised concerns about the carbon fiber hull and had warned Stockton that it would worsen.
The carbon fiber and titanium, there's a rule you don't do that. Well, I did.
Here is communication between Stockton and Carl after he participated in a test dive on the Titan in 2019. Carl, there comes a time when logic has to overrule impatience. The evidence suggests there is an issue/defect in one area. Without knowing what that defect or issue is, your models and experts cannot say how it will affect the performance of the hull. In the email chain, Carl urges Stockton to do more testing. He pushes for 50 test dives compared to the 7 that were initially proposed by Stockton, who only wanted to do 7 before allowing passengers to board the vessel. Stockton, your recent emails tell me that we have 2 fundamental misunderstandings. The first is regarding your role while visiting us in the Bahamas. I value your experience and advice on many things, but not an assessment on carbon fiber pressure hulls. The second, even more disturbing misunderstanding is your concern that I will either intentionally or unintentionally succumb to the pressure and take advantage of our clients. I realize, more than anyone, that this is the primary pitfall and have taken multiple steps to guard against this. As someone who has been on the receiving end of uninformed accusations from industry pundits, I hope you, of all people, will think twice before expressing opinions on subjects in which you are not fully versed. Terrifying. Even the advice of a friend was seen as an attack and responded to with a veiled threat. If this wasn't enough, more damning evidence came to light in emails between Stockton Rush and Rob McCallum, deep ocean exploration expert. In the exchanges that were released, he made his concerns to the company very clear, urging them to seek certification before using the Titan submersible for commercial tours. Rob, I implore you to take every care in testing and sea trials and to be very, very conservative. You are wanting to use a prototype, unclassed technology in a very hostile place. As much as I appreciate entrepreneurship and innovation, you are potentially putting an entire industry at risk. 4 days later, Stockton's response. I know that our engineering-focused, innovative approach, as opposed to an existing standard compliance-focused design process, flies in the face of the submersible orthodoxy, but that is the nature of innovation. I have grown tired of industry players who try to use a safety argument to stop innovation and new entrants from entering their small existing market. Since Guillermo and I started OceanGate, we have heard the baseless cries of "you are going to kill someone" way too often. I take this as a serious personal insult. Rob's reply the next day. Rob, I think you are potentially placing yourself and your clients in a dangerous dynamic. Ironically, in your race to Titanic, you are mirroring that famous catch cry, "She is unsinkable." Having dived the Titanic, having stood in the coroner's court as a technical expert, it would be remiss of me not to bring this to your attention. It is clear this is a man who would not listen to reason from friend or expert. He had an unwavering belief that he was right, and this belief was pure ignorance, pure arrogance, pure human hubris, just like the story of the Titanic. In a recent interview, Rob McCallum would say, "The industry has been trying for several years to get Stockton Rush, CEO, to halt his program, and for 2 reasons. One is carbon fiber is not an acceptable material. The other, that is, the only submersible in the world that is doing commercial work, that was unclassed, that is to say. It's not certified by an independent agency. And those two things together go hand in hand. The reason it wasn't classed or certified was because no class, no society, no certifying agency is going to sign off on carbon fiber as a building product for a submersible. Stockton Rush seemed to be under the delusional notion that anybody who disagreed with him was either ill-informed or trying to stop his success. There's a difference between a man on a mission and a madman on a mission. The latter is extremely dangerous. Another red flag, a whistleblower who voiced his concerns and was ultimately fired from speaking out, came forward. OceanGate's top director, David Lockridge, was Titan's project director of marine operations and was let go from the company after he demanded that there be more rigorous security and safety checks on the sub, including testing to prove its integrity. He also wanted the company to carry out a scan of the Titan's hull to detect potential flaws, rather than relying on acoustic monitoring, which could only detect an issue milliseconds before an implosion. In a court document filed in 2018, lawyers for the company said Lockridge's employment was terminated because he could not accept their research and plans, including safety protocols. OceanGate made further claims that Lockridge desired to be fired and had wiped a company hard drive and shared confidential information. It's strange. Prior to his firing, OceanGate had hailed him as an expert in the field of submarine operations and rescue, but only when his views didn't align with theirs did he become a problem. Most shocking was the account from Jay Bloom, who described how Stockton flew to Vegas to persuade him to come on the expedition at a discounted rate. Jay Bloom and his son Sean Bloom, who has an intrepid curiosity with the Titanic ship, were invited to go on the Titan submersible. The father and son who would ultimately take their place, Shahzada Dawood, Sulaiman Dawood. Jay Bloom recalls the time that Stockton came to Vegas to see him to close the deal. Jay Bloom recounts, he, Stockton, said he was coming to see me, and that he was coming in from the North Las Vegas airport, which is an odd selection because most people come into Henderson Executive. When I asked him why he was coming in that airport, he said it's because he was coming in a 2-seater experimental plane that he had built. And I started to think, he's coming in a 2-seater experimental plane to pitch me to go out on a 5-seater experimental sub that he built. He has a different risk appetite than I do. Even the discounted rate wasn't enough for him to shake this eerie feeling. And when he spoke to his son, his fears only worsened. His son said that one of the safety concerns was structural integrity. Sean found it difficult to believe that a sub that size could get to the bottom of the ocean without imploding. Ultimately, he ended up warning his father, and he was right. Sadly, he was right. Given account after account, we can see that Stockton Rush was warned. He was warned time and time again, and he refused to listen to anybody. And these troubling accounts continue. David Pogue, a reporter who took a ride last year on the Titan, said that the lighting and handles were bought from Camping World. He described the Titan as jerry-rigged, MacGyvered, and that a knockoff PlayStation controller was used for steering. He said when he raised these concerns to Stockton, once again, he brushed them off. He said the Titan was state-of-the-art, having been looked over by people from NASA, Boeing, and Washington University. On his trip, David Pogue says that they got lost for 5 hours, and that the idea of adding an emergency beacon was discussed, but never happened. A quote from Stockton's interview with David Pogue. At some point, safety is just pure waste. I mean, if you want to be safe, don't get out of bed, don't get in your car, don't do anything. A gentleman named Chris Brown paid $80,000 after a few beers with a friend, but realized that the venture was not for him When he asked more questions, which had no answers, he said parts of the sub seemed shoddy, like DIY shop work. Arthur Lober, someone who did take the Titan submersible, said it was a suicide mission and he was lucky to survive. First it didn't work, and then they had to have zip ties reattached, and then it had electrical issues. Through and through, there were problems with the Titan, and Stockton ignored it. He gave no warning to his passengers, but potentially, as other people backed out like Chris Brown, we can see that maybe they should have looked further into it. Stockton Rush had ample knowledge to know that his experimental submersible should just be that, experimental, not for commercial use. What was the desperation to get people on this submersible? And as we can see across the accounts, he was willing to sell tickets for different rates. $80,000, $150,000. Are there more dark secrets of Stockton Rush to come out? What was really going on in his head? And what was going on in his wallet? When the communications were lost at 1 hour and 45 minutes, the crew would have ran out of oxygen in 94 hours. Regardless of if the vessel was intact or where they were, the oxygen countdown began. Strangely, it took the crew on the Polar Prince close to 8 hours to alert the US Coast Guard that the Titan had gone missing. Were they hoping for the best? Were they expecting a similar situation as when Arthur Lober had boarded and had been lost for 5 hours? We don't know. Finally, when the Polar Prince raised the alert, there was 86 hours of oxygen left, and the rescue mission was only fully underway by the morning of June 19th. The Coast Guard Rear Admiral said in a press conference, "We are deploying all available assets to make sure we can locate the craft," but he also made it clear that it was a challenge, which was a generous term. They were hoping to find a 22-foot-long submersible in an area half the size of Belgium, or in US terms, twice the size of Connecticut. At the time of the press conference, the sub had approximately 63 hours left of oxygen. There were further complications. The Titan lacked any emergency radio beacon. It was impossible for the surface vessel to, in simple terms, find my iPhone and help bring up the submersible. There was no way to know how deep the sub was. For all they knew, it could be floating on the surface with all 5 passengers trapped inside. The biggest problem was the topic which has come up time and time again and was ignored and boasted about by Stockton. The fact that the Titan was made of carbon fiber. There were countless unpredictable ways in which it could fail, none of which gave any hope of rescue. With such little information to work with, the US and Canadian authorities were honestly putting their lives at risk and tirelessly and exhaustedly trying with commercial sea firms, military planes, a submarine, even rescue ships were using sonar to ping the ocean to try and detect the Titan, all to no avail. On June the 21st, search parties believed they had their first legitimate lead, hearing periodic banging, which they believed could be from the passengers on the Titan. Captain Jamie Frederick of the 1st Coast Guard District ensured they were doing everything possible, saying, "We'll continue to put every available asset that we have in an effort to find the Titan and the crew members." Later that day, the search included 5 surface vessels, 2 ROVs, underwater robot vehicles were airlifted to Newfoundland, and a special salvage system designed to lift up to 27 tons of machinery out of the water was set to arrive the next day. There was less than 12 hours of oxygen left at that point, making that window nearly impossible. However, none of these efforts would matter. On June 22nd, the US Coast Guard announced that an ROV launched from the offshore vessel Horizon Arctic, which had arrived at the search site the night before, had found remains from the Titan, 1,600 feet from the bow of the Titanic on the seafloor. That's some 12,500 feet deep. The first piece of debris discovered was the vessel's nose cone, part of a large debris field containing the front of the pressure hull. In an interview, Stockton Rush once told the BBC, "There are 3 words in the English language that are known throughout the planet: Coca-Cola, God, and Titanic." It was reported that the sub imploded due to a defect in the hull caused by its material that is said to have triggered an instantaneous implosion due to the underwater pressure. The water pressure, 3,800 meters down at the site of the Titanic wreck, is roughly 400 atmospheres, about the same as having 35 elephants on your shoulder. It was reported within less than 1 second, the vessel being pushed down on the weight of a 3,800 meter column of water would have immediately crumbled in from all sides. The implosion would have killed everyone within less than 20 milliseconds, a speed faster than the brain can even process. However, other theories have come to light that suggest it would have been a more terrifying death. As we know, the Titan commercially had taken around 5 trips, and each descent the carbon fiber hull weakened further and further until its final trip, where it failed completely. From unconfirmed leak logs from the mothership Polar Prince, we see an exchange between the Polar Prince and the Titan. If this leaked information and these statements are true, it means that they were using the thrusters to get themselves back to the surface. Releasing the ballast and the frame hadn't worked, and they chose to use the thrusters because it was the last resort. But doing so drained all the power.
Experts think the sub finally went totally dark before pitching forward, throwing all crew members towards the front porthole section of the sub as it entered a freefall dive for over 900 meters, or a half mile before it finally imploded.
Naturally, a story like this will bring about a lot of theories, one of them being a cover-up, that they knew from the beginning that the passengers had perished, but they still decided to involve the media and the rescue missions, spending millions of dollars. Why would they do that? Again, that's just another theory. The story of the OceanGate submersible, its innovator, and its passengers are a cautionary tale for us all, in different measurements and different degrees. For the millionaires and billionaires with $200K to spare, they might remember this before embarking on a deadly adventure which gives a whole new meaning to the saying once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. To those not in the 1%, maybe reconsider that theme park ride, or taking a drive with a friend, that bungee jump that seems so safe, or the latest social media challenge which is a bit daring. Whatever it is, keep those 3 words with you: Coca-Cola, God, and Titanic.